because you're a classicist, I cannot help you but ask this question, because again, something that came up to me, and I'm sorry if some of these questions are strange, but while I was reading your book, one of the interesting things about ancient texts in the last couple of decades is that, for centuries, everybody sort of accepted these ancient texts as true, or at least a description of reality in some form, right? So all the way back to Homer, Xerxes sacrificed 1,000 bulls at the tomb of Achilles, on his way to make war on Greece. And then there was this sort of skeptical period where we dismissed it all as nonsense. These are just stories. These are just straight up myths. And then we started to realize, wait a second, the coastline of Troy resembles almost precisely what Homer was describing. I was in Troy a couple of years ago, and, they're all the way down to finding, hey, there's the burned remnants of these cities here. And you've seen in the last couple of decades this sort of a reevaluation of a lot of these really ancient stories, saying we all believed them and then we didn't believe them at all. And now maybe we're discovering that there was a lot more truth to them than we thought. And you keep on referencing throughout the book back, hey, this sounds a lot like what Genesis was saying. So 2 questions. One, did Achilles actually exist? And second of all, do you think that what you're saying is just another reevaluation of maybe these texts are truer than we thought?
So there's a meme going around. I think it's Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean, and he's labeled as Herodotus. And somebody says to him, "You were telling the truth." And Jack Sparrow says, "I do that quite a lot, actually. People are always surprised." And that's kind of the phenomenon you're describing, right? That we keep coming up with, or it'll be like, they'll conduct an excavation at Lachish and discover that Isaiah's account of the sieges from the Near East on ancient Jerusalem has a lot to do with what must have actually happened. There's a lot of archaeological confirmation for a lot of this stuff. Do I think that Achilles, as described in the Iliad, is a real guy? Not quite, but I certainly think that a hero or multiple heroes actually made the impression upon some poet one time that is embodied. In other words, the character of Achilles refers to a reality, and it does so in a poetic way. I don't even think Homer would expect us particularly to care one way or another whether there was this guy or not. The ancient Greeks sort of assumed that there was somebody in the background of this, but they too were incredibly open-minded about, even skeptical about, what the historical details were, because they understood that they were being presented with a document that was designed to speak in a certain way about a war that really did happen, but with all kinds of poetic license or poetic depictions of what it was like to be there. Even Herodotus, who very much is trying to give you a true account of what happened between the Greeks and Persians, refers to his story as a kind of painting that locks in the color of the event so that it won't fade away. And there are histories, modern histories, that do that, but there are also modern histories that have no interest in that at all, and they're written differently. I say all of this because we don't give ancient authors nearly enough credit for their sophistication when it came to both recording facts and data and to taking poetic license in the full knowledge that that's what they were doing. We have sort of assumed that because they didn't know everything that we know about the physical world, they were therefore completely besotted with fantasy and superstition. But in point of fact, a careful reading of, say, the Greek philosophers shows that there's a high degree of awareness when you're talking in kind of metaphorical language and when you're talking with, giving a particular report about something that you could have filmed with a GoPro camera if you had been there. And what has happened, I think, in the wake of the scientific revolution is something very unhelpful for both sides, if you will, of the science and religion debate, which is the science side of the debate has said the Bible doesn't always speak in materially verifiable terms. Therefore, the Bible is wrong, right? So you get these arguments to the effect that, because the Psalms say that the sun runs a course across the sky, therefore the Bible can't possibly be infallible, or it can't always be telling the truth because it has these mistakes about the way that the physical world works. And the answer from the church has sometimes been, no, you fools, you lovers of mankind, you evil apostates. The Bible is correct in every material particular. That is, every time the Bible says something and science says something different, the Bible is right, meaning the Bible is physically accurate, whereas science is wrong, meaning science is physically inaccurate. And I think this is to accept a standard that no ancient person would have accepted and no modern person accepts in practice, which is, unless a piece of writing or speaking is framed purely in quantifiable material physical terms, it has no truth value whatsoever. Whereas instead, if you go and read like the debates between Galileo and the Catholic Church, Galileo was perfectly capable of pointing out, as were others before him, that the Bible is describing how the sun looks to a person standing on the earth because it's a psalm written from the perspective of a person standing on the earth. In other words, there's a high degree of sophistication and self-awareness in ancient texts about what kind of information is being delivered, and it's not always materially factual information. Sometimes it is.
Or intended to be, is what you're saying.
It's not always intended to be materially. That's right. Sometimes it is intended to be, and in those cases, I think you will often find that the ancients are smarter and more accurate than we give them credit for. But the other problem here is that we expect the ancients to be operating according to a standard that nobody would have thought to operate with, namely this materialist standard of truth, and that we ourselves don't operate with if we're really honest about the full scope of the way that we talk about and experience and describe the world. It would be crazy to operate this way, but we expect the ancients to operate that way because we have this sort of arrogance that they were, I don't know, just like total slack-jawed caveman idiots, basically.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation. If you want to hear other conversations like it, you can subscribe. You can also find our content wherever you get your podcasts, or you can head over to thebridgehead.ca where we post both written commentary and video. Thanks so much for joining us.